Yep. I call this public meeting of the Eagle Mountain Saginaw Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present and that this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Welcome everybody to the study session and reports. The first report is Mr. Shealy, budget update. Moving you to first tonight, so.
Yeah, I'm going to try not to take the whole hour.
Okay, we appreciate that. Whatever you need to do.
See if we can't move this along.
I've got time cards. We can use them.
From a budget development standpoint, when the legislature's in session, it always throws a few wrinkles into the formula. This year a little more than usual because they're actually telling us they have money. So we're trying to figure out if we can get an edge onto what may be coming down the pipe. So far, I can't say that I have a good idea, primarily because the Senate and the House are quite far apart in how they're approaching spending the money. But we're going to stay with existing law, and I'll maybe throw in a comment or two as to how things might change as we go forward. Start with the assumptions, which we usually do. Demographer's estimate for student growth is 784 students. Everything at this point in time with regards to staffing has been based on that number. We're also using that number for our revenue estimates. Historically, 784 students has turned into 916 students with respect to WADA, and that's 95% of the calculation, or 95% of for ADA for average daily attendance, and then 123% to get up to WADA. We did look at that. That number has been trending up, but we kept it at 123%. Assessed value, this one is pretty critical. And you can see the percentages that we have used, 11, 9, 7, 6, and 4. The higher those numbers are in the first 2 or 3 years, the more impact they have down the line. If the 9% a year from now is 10%, that makes a big difference down the road. If the 9% is 8%, that hurts. It creates a significant adjustment. Those are the numbers I use. They can be adjusted, they can be changed, just let me know. The one thing that we don't know, and we've been looking at the bills in the legislature, has to do with property tax reform. One way or the other, it's coming from both the House and the Senate. The Senate is in the form of a revenue cap. The House is in the form of an increase in the homestead exemption. Either one of those were supposed to be held harmless. However, I'm not quite sure, and I haven't seen anything that indicates that they will exempt out interest in sinking, which they really need to, or we're going to have a very difficult time because we're so close to the cap. The one thing I will say, in the Senate's version, they actually did not address schools because they know we have a unique rate structure. So they're acknowledging the difference, and that's good news. There also are some questions as to sales. Does that reset the target? Does it make a difference for us? And also new construction. And both of those relate to the property tax cap, where we would be allowed to go up a total of 2% per year, plus possibly new construction, plus possibly values reassessed through sale. Like I said, we're not changing anything right now because we're supposed to be held harmless. We have not changed anything on the interest in sinking side because they've acknowledged the fact that we have a unique rate structure, so I think we're good using those numbers as long as the economy holds or slows down slowly. We're assuming class sizes are gonna remain the same. We're neither decreasing nor increase. We've spent the last couple of years making sure salaries are competitive. We assume we will continue along those lines. I have no significant programmatic items which are being changed. And those things really are pretty critical. We are funding growth, which is, we've always funded growth, but it's also one of those things that can be a little tight. So we have a per capita allocation for campuses. That per capita will go up or change as their populations change. We expect school openings in the following year. Next year, we have Marine Creek Middle School, followed by Copper Creek Elementary School in 2020-21, and another elementary in 2021-22. So those are the new schools we have coming online. Once again, we're assuming that core staffing for each of these schools is going to be the same as the existing schools. So unless there's something I don't know about, we're assuming we're going to go forward with the same structure that we currently have. We are continuing to see an increase in our special ed numbers. And we anticipate that we will continue to provide instructional programs to meet the needs. We also assume we're going to continue to increase fund balance. It's the one thing that we have built in. We started a couple years ago. We are going to continue to increase a minimum of $1.5 million a year in fund balance until we get to 90 days. 90 days of fund balance. We increased that last year. We'll increase that again this year. There have been some comments in the legislature that have to do with if funding elements are changed, it may change how we or how many students are coded or recognized. I don't think that's an issue for us. I think we've been very aggressive in evaluating the needs of kids. So I think what we're looking at is, as opposed to an increase in cost, we're really looking at the potential of having revenue to offset those costs we've already realized.
Will that formula just change then?
What's that?
The formula will change about the special populations and the...
We're looking at a change in the bilingual based on the program you have, the addition of dyslexia as a factor. There is some changes in how you calculate your compensatory ed funding. So there are some changes that are filtering through. Those changes, there has been some expectation that if the formula is increased, there will be a rush to identify these kids. I think like I said, we've been very aggressive in trying to meet those needs. I think for us, it's going to be an increase in revenue to address the needs we've identified. There are a lot of factors that we have to consider and keep in mind. Labor market analysis, we're still in a hotbed labor market. We still have to fight to attract personnel, in particular teachers. There's between us and Northwest and Denton, we've got a lot of competition because we're all growing really fast. School openings, keep a real close eye on what CLEAT's doing over there. That makes a pretty significant impact. Economic growth within the district and also within Texas and the United States. We're seeing a lot more economic growth, and it's not just the start of houses. There's a lot of stuff as I take different routes to work, and CLEAT keeps us informed. We're seeing a lot of, the commercial component in the district is more significant now than it has been in the past. That is very important, especially when it comes to issuance of debt. Cost of construction, CLEAT's continuing to monitor that. He gives me updates on a pretty regular basis. Cost of borrowing. Today, the 30-day T-bills are down 10 basis points over the last month, which is a great sign. The Fed is not looking at raising interest rates, but possibly once. In fact, they may not raise them at all this year. Those are all really good as we come up and start looking at high school number 4. CLEAT has to control labor costs, and I have to control interest rates. fairly simple, straightforward, no problem. And we are continuing to monitor available capacity in terms of debt issuance, and we're also looking at funding alternatives. So we are looking at the best way to set these up. The last issuance, we made sure that we left some gaps out there, and we really hit hard where we felt the yield curve was relatively flat, so we could minimize the maturity or accelerate the maturity and minimize the interest costs. So we've been trying to set ourselves up in every way we can as we go forward. I don't anticipate there'll be a significant refunding between now and high school number 4. I want to look at revenue, and this is pretty small, and I'm sorry, but the gist of it is in the big numbers. The components have to do with the change in WADA or enrollment, the taxable assessed value, and you can see the percentages, the 11, 9, 7, 6, and 4% there. State aid is a calculated figure, and on behalf is also calculated. Property tax collections, those are once again based on the change in TAV. We have some other revenue figures that we're continuing to look at, interest income, SHARS revenue. We also have federal revenue that we're looking at. When all is said and done over the next, if I can find over the next 5 years, these are the annual increases that we're expecting to see in revenue. You may notice 5 years out that there's a real decrease from 6.9 to 3.2 million. That is triggered by a 2% decrease in growth. We get lag money the first year that we get the property taxes, the next year the state takes it. So if we go at 12%, next year we're going to lose that. If we only grow at 10%, that's less of a lag. So we have to watch very carefully to see how that turns around, and a 2% hit as opposed to a 1% decrease makes a significant change, especially when you're slowing down a little bit in growth 5 years out. Something we just have to plan for. We're looking at it. That's 23, 24. I also have no revenue, or the revenue for the opening of new schools is based at $250 per student. There is in House Bill 3, which is a school finance bill, quadrupling that number from $250 to $1,000 per student. For Marine Creek Middle School, that would be the difference between $150,000 and $600,000. So as we go forward and open these schools, that can make a really significant impact. That impact is not shown on these pages. I would point out, and I know once again it's small, but currently we have about 60% of our budget is financed by the folks that live here. In 5 years, if nothing changes, that number will increase to 73%. So we're not a wealthy district, but we're still asking the taxpayers here to foot the vast majority. If they do the property tax relief, especially if they do some of the numbers that they're looking at in House Bill 3, those numbers could change pretty dramatically. They could go much closer to a 50-50 share, which there actually is a law that would require the state to step up and pay 50% of the bill. I don't think that's going to happen. The debt service part and the critical element down here is just the bottom line. As we sit right now, we're sitting at, man, I can't hardly see that, 38 cents is the natural rate. Anything we get above 38 cents we can use to prepay bonds, or we can use to accelerate the maturity of the bonds. In 5 years, that number is dropping to 31. That's the critical factor, because that's the factor that's going to allow us to finance high school number 4. So we have all the current issuances. The current issuance also includes the final phase of Copper Creek Elementary. We do have to fold in the elementary after that, but it's gonna fold in with growth. I still think we're going to be looking at having plenty of capacity to stay within without raising taxes, to stay within what we promised we would be able to do when we went out for the bond. I think we're gonna be able to do it. It looks good right now. So at least I'm keeping my fingers crossed. If CLEAT will control construction costs, we're good to go. I want to talk about HB3. That is the significant school finance bill that has started in the House. The two critical elements, one goes one way, one goes the other. They are going to raise the basic allotment from $51.40 to $60.30. That's $900, it is $900 per child, with a WADA of 25,000. That comes to a little over $20 million. However, they're getting rid of the cost of education index, which costs us right at about 18 million. So between the two, I'm calculating that we're gonna come up with an increase of about 6.8 million. Now, there's a lot of other factors in there, but this is just kind of in a nutshell really quick. There is a lot of discussion about the cost of education index. Two major components. Number one are the federal funds that you get to address the difficulty of educating some kids, and also the competition in the market in which you live. The problem is that number hasn't been updated since 1993. So we're going on 25 years, and things may have changed in those 25 years. So rather than update it, they're talking about getting rid of it. That puts us at somewhat of a disadvantage compared to some other areas, but that's what's proposed. This calculation is very difficult. Moak and Casey, their initial estimate for us was 4.8 million. They revised that Friday to 6.1 million. And the Equity Center in their calculation came up with 6.4 million. There's a lot of pieces in flux. So, and then to top that off by saying that nothing in this bill is included in the Senate's finance bill. So they're gonna have a meeting of the minds. Lieutenant Governor Patrick has said that they will not go home until they have addressed property, taxes, and school finance. Once again, I think we're looking at a special session, which means we may have to go into the late portion of this budget not really knowing whether we're going to have that money or not. I guess it's a good thing to be able to possibly have some additional funding, but it would be nice to know it sooner rather than later.
Is that 1.12 just our area, DFW area, or Fort
Yes.
Worth? Does it ever go below 1? Is one the floor?
One's the bottom, one's the
Okay.
base. Now, we get 1.12, Northwest, which is primarily in Denton, and Wise gets 1.09. And I think Collin County is at like 1.6, something around there. There's some percentiles out there. We're not at the highest, but we're the second highest level, which is 1.12. In that House Bill 3, there are several things that play back and forth. One of them is an increase in golden pennies, which means they're not subject to recapture, which is great, except we're no longer going to be Chapter 41, so we don't get any benefit from that. They're going to roll some things into the basic allotment. One of them is gifted and talented allocations, but we overspend our gifted and talented allocation right now. And once it's kind of like with special ed, we've really focused more on the needs of our kids than how much money we're getting for those kids. We kind of, try to balance it in total, but we don't say, well, just because we're getting X amount, that's all we're going to spend. That number those two things have never been joined at the hip. And I'm kind of glad we haven't, because frankly, we overspend in just about every one of those categories. There will be a dyslexia allotment. I'm pretty sure regardless of which Final bill comes out, dyslexia has become an allotment. It's not a huge allotment, but there is an allotment. A big difference could be the change in calculation for transportation. Currently, it's linear density, which is how many kids per mile. They're gonna go to straight mileage. So efficiency is no longer gonna be a factor. That bothers me a little bit, but at the same time, if it's based on actual mileage, I think we're gonna get quite a bump. Right now, we're getting 1.2 million. We spend right at 6 million on transportation. I think this may kick that from 1.1, depending on, they haven't said what the amount is gonna be. I'm hoping it's similar to what we get for cars. But that could be a couple $1 million in and of itself. Comp Ed, they're talking about tying that to the census as opposed to free and reduced lunch levels. I'm not sure I'm crazy about that. The focus of this bill seems to be to reduce recapture. It's been a thorn in the side of the legislature for decades. And the increase from the current allotment, 5140 to 6030, will bring, and I heard the percentage and I don't remember it, a majority of school districts out of Chapter 41. In particular, the large school districts, Houston, Dallas, and Fort Worth will no longer, and Austin will, but San Antonio are no longer gonna have to worry about that. They will be back solidly into 42, as will we. Increase in the homeowners exemption. The revenue cap is stalled. I think we're probably looking at an increase in homeowners exemption, maybe as much as doubling it from $25,000 to $50,000. There is also an increased allotment, I think I mentioned earlier, for bilingual and dual language programs. They're starting to differentiate between the types of programs that you have. We're watching these move. They do make a difference. They're not fully defined, and we have not included any changes for them in any of the long-range planning that we're looking at. Personnel costs, this year we're looking at averaging right at 46 students. That's 11 elementary, 28 middle school, and 7 high school. That's an increase of 46. It's a significant increase because of the opening of Marine Creek Middle School. Middle schools and high schools create an efficiency difficulty, but those are the numbers, and we've looked at them pretty tight. You'll notice in the years going forward, those numbers fall. Elementaries are a bit simpler to absorb. They're a little more efficient, primarily because you do not have extracurricular activities. So we're looking at about $3.4 million, almost 3.5 for regular ed classroom teachers. We have put a SPED CTE note in for 250. I saw the numbers today. That's not going to be enough. We also have core costs that we're completing for Marine Creek Middle School of about $500,000. A lot of that is operational. Custodians, custodial supervisors, maintenance people that were not included, I don't believe, in the presentation a couple months ago. And we're also going to have to start staffing for Copper Creek Elementary. So we're going to hire the principal and assistant, or principal and secretary probably coming on first quarter of next year, and then we'll have the assistant principals, librarians, and counselors coming in after that. That note below that other note, I put in an amount based on a percentage. I think it's 5% of the other additions. Once again, I'm trying to put a check figure in. Those, I don't know what that would be, but we are expanding, and there's going to be expansions in other places. Based on that, you'll notice we've got a personnel hit next year of 4.6 million, and then it drops. It will increase substantially in 24-25 when we open high school number 4. I really didn't want to forecast that until we get the legislative information back, because we have time to adjust, number one, and number two, it could dramatically impact the opening of high school, number 4. At this point, like I said, I think we're okay, and we'll get to that. Here's a summary. You notice the change in revenue, and that comes from the previous page. The personnel, and I do have a surplus or deficit that we're going to start with. Some startup costs for elementary. Now, I put in a 2% cost of living adjustment across the board. That can be, well, of course it can be changed. That is for illustrative purposes alone, just to give you an idea of what the cost is. I also have equity adjustments. And even though it says 150 in the first year, that continues each year. It's just not an additional 150. Other cost drivers, I put $1 million a year, and that does increase every year. So that can be repetitive costs, that can be one-time costs. I'm just assuming that we're going to have, once again, programs that we're gonna have to roll out and things we're gonna have to do. I've also got $1 million in next year for additional projects outside of the bond, and $500,000 the year after. Those numbers continue then at 1.5 million. It doesn't show, but there is capacity that rolls forward. We're also looking at how much money we've been shifting to interest and sinking, and a lot of that has to do with the decline of that rate. And we get to a surplus or a deficit. Next year, right now, as it sits, well, I'm looking at about a $500,000 decrease. I'm conservative, but that's my shot for the moment. Next year, I've got about 795, and then you'll notice those numbers turn around and we start running surpluses. We do have, and I have built in, $1.5 million in fund balance growth. So even though we have a deficit from operations of 535,000, we would report a surplus of 964,000. And that's important because we have to focus on the 535 in terms of how we operate. But please know, if I say we're gonna lose $500,000 and we walk in and make $1 million, don't shoot me. That's what it's supposed to do, because we're supposed to keep that $1.5 million rolling into fund balance. I'm not really concerned about hitting that number every year, as long as the trend over years is there. So if we were to have a final budget that looked like this, we'd be $500,000 below the target. And then next year we would be $1.3 million below the target. And that's this bottom line where I'm looking at the running total. But after that, we'd turn around and we would be adding to fund balance at a rate that's quicker than what we would lose these next 2 years. The other piece I would say that we can use to moderate this has to do with the cost of living adjustment. If instead of 2%, we do not give a cost of living adjustment, that takes the $500,000 loss and makes it a $2 million gain, or a $3.5 million increase to fund balance. So I did put the cost of living adjustment in there. Primarily, it's to illustrate what can happen, but that's also the one piece, assuming we're gonna need the teachers, we're gonna need the principals, as we open schools, we're gonna need the APs. Those are pretty much non-negotiables. The question's gonna be, what kind of labor market are we in? And whether or not, how much we have to adjust salaries to remain competitive, and what will that do in the long run, so at the end of 3, 4, 5 years, we have built up some additional fund balance. I'll look at it long term. If we made a immediate short-term reaction, we wouldn't give raises the next 2 years. And I'm not sure that's short-sighted. Couple of insights, and just to recap, I don't see that anything is going to change or come from this legislature that does not make things better. there is a consensus to increase funding for schools. How many strings are attached? That's a question. But I don't see anything that potentially is going to come down the pipe that could in any way, shape, or form be a negative. Another thing, we have not included any new programs. We have recognized the growth and especially in particular with respect to the special programs. We have not changed anything in terms of the rate at which we're growing or varied from the demographer's numbers. I believe that the opening of Eagle Mountain High School is likely to cause us to run an operating deficit for 2 years. So I have an operating deficit for the next 2 years, and then I'm looking at things turning around. And I think we're going to build fund balance, but I think there's a real possibility we're going to have a hit when we open Eagle Mountain High School. There are several decisions that could impact that. One of them has to do with participation in UIL events, whether we're going to go, and I don't know the term, somebody can tell me, 4 years or start with junior varsity, or whether we're going to have varsity. Those questions can have a fairly significant impact. I just think it needs to be, everybody, like I said, we need to continue to look long-term. As soon as we get out of this legislature, I will come back with probably a 7 or 8 year analysis. But I think right now we're going to have about a 2-year deficit, and then I think we're going to build fund balance again. So I think it's going to be a dip. That's a big school.
I think the preference would be is that we do it the way we did Saginaw, not Chisholm Trail. That was so unfair to Chisholm Trail to start off with the varsity schedule. So, and ban anything you want to pick.
Yeah, and
So however that timing works with your schedule, that's what I think we should lean towards.
There are, and I've looked at the funding, and it does make a pretty significant difference, but we can survive the funding either way. The question is what's best for kids, because it's what we've always done. So
I think best for kids is to let them pay junior varsity and then get realigned and not do what Chisholm did and have to start playing varsity schedule with sophomore kids and freshmen.
I'm not going near that.
All right.
Once again, as we move forward, even if we don't know what's coming out of Austin, we're going to try to bring back Plan A, Plan B with options or recommendations as to how we might move forward. Last year we did it with contingent positions. These are positions we think are critical, but if you don't have the money, you don't have the money. So we'll come back and we will continue to provide information to you with respect to staffing needs, with respect to operational and programmatic needs. And then we'll talk about what we're seeing as far as consultations with our legislators down in Austin and what they're feeling like is going to happen. So even though we may not have a specific projection, we will have an understanding of what the options are as we go forward. Does anybody have any questions?
No, sir, not at this time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is the operations report, Mr. Welch.
Before we start the Marine Creek portion of it, we did have some visitors from a school district, Salina, come out to visit our school last week. And so they had about 18 people show up, and so they were just kind of touring some schools. I mean, ours was just one of them, but kind of current trends and things, and so they were impressed with what was going on in our building. And then we also had a group from Canyon ISD visit Chisholm Trail High School today. And they, again, kind of the same thing, looking through there, and we were just one of their stops. On Area D on Marine Creek, we have a few of these things because I had about a 2-week break. Then we had spring break, so a little bit, these are a little bit delayed more than normal. But in the hallway, not on the main surface, that's where the VCT has been completed. You can see the bleachers are in. The ceiling tiles in that main hallway where the VCT, that's been installed, and you can see the sanding and striping going on the floor right there. In the cafeteria, they worked on the ceiling grid and they had the VCT down, but if you look at that, it looks kind of rough on the flooring. That's just, what we do is we have them covered up. And so that way, you don't have to worry about people tracking something in, and I don't care what you do in trying to keep it protected. If you don't get something down there right away, it's just gonna suffer. So, Richards, immediately once they put it down, we look at it and then we cover it up. Area A, this is looking down past the media center to the east. And the one thing I'd want to point out, you can start seeing the ceiling grid going in. And you notice also the site, as you get closer to being completed, how clean it looks. And so again, it's kind of one of those tricks, make sure if it stays clean, everybody starts treating it that way and kind of moves them toward that finishing push. Looking up into the little think tank area is the sheetrock at the fur downs, and again, ceiling grid going in. In this case, you can see the windows going in along with, same thing, fur downs. Area B, which is the science wing, toilet fixtures, light fixtures, and ceiling grid. And then this is what, on Area B, one of the little collaboration areas, you can kind of start to see it come together. It has the framing, it doesn't have the windows in there yet, but you can see that's where the little niche nook will be where they can have the collaboration, and the teachers will still be able to see them out there if they choose to let the kids go out there. And they also have one of the screens out there, and they'll have a printer so that they can work in those areas, the kids can. Area C, just kind of a repeat of the same thing, but they're a little bit farther behind just because that's the stage in it, so they're doing the tape and bedding, but they do have the ceiling grid in. And then the upstairs, just, again, now they don't have the insulation on the ducts like the other ones do, so again, it's just, it's behind, but it's not behind in that sense. At this point, the tennis courts have all been poured, and those are very, the slabs are just a huge slab. You almost build a building on them. But they have completed that, and they've pulled all the cabling in it, and it's all met standards. Any questions before we go on to Copper Creek? Copper Creek, after our last board meeting, they began on Friday, and one of the first things they did is they had to put their silt fence in. They cut the curb out. So this is about 2.5 weeks old, and so they've got the dirt folks out there. They've already put the pad in. They've done all the testing on the pad. So probably at the beginning of next week, we're going to start drilling piers on the main part of the pad. So a lot of quick things going on in there. And so one of the things they're doing is they get that pad done first, then they'll start excavating some of the peripheral things. So just didn't want to hold us up by doing all the dirt grading at that point. So trying to get ahead and gain some days. And that's a kind of a north-south view. That's south looking back at the park. And there's our sign right there. So that's about all I could get on those days. Any questions over Copper Creek? Highland Middle School, Creekview, and the Gilliland renovations. So this would be Highland, because it has a different slab. But that's just showing the plumbing that we've had to put in there. And at this point, it's already been concreted over and sealed up. And this would be Creekview, and same thing, but it just looks different because of the different type of slab that we're dealing with. And conference room, and that shows where the little outlets would be located. That's been sealed up, and it doesn't look anything like that. And going back, just when you start looking at the, well, right now you can see through those walls. Obviously now you can't. They've sided them up on both sides, so. It's moving right along. Any questions on that project?
It's moving along without any student interruptions.
I mean, everybody's coexisted pretty well so far. I mean,
Okay.
oh, there's Anthony.
Yeah. I was looking past you, kind of making eye contact.
I mean, I haven't heard many complaints either way. I mean, so I'm
Okay.
sure there's always something.
Just to represent Highland, I was there last week, and they were saying how clean the work site was, and they've modified the work schedule based upon what activities were going on. I believe they hosted UIL on a Saturday, so they curtailed work on that Saturday and made it up at different times, so I think they've been really good partners. It's been good.
Because jackhammering that concrete out was pretty loud, so
They did it now.
so they worked around. Shade structures, we're moving along with those. They've been ordered from Grounds for Play, and as far as Lake Country, we're still working through our 90 days, make sure the land's everything we want it to be. And so it's just fast and furious, moving right along. Any
Little
questions?
red, I guess they've marked the area, they've surveyed it, because you can see little red flags out. And that would be for the property where, is that?
The 19
If you
acres.
go out there and look at it, the 19 acres would now be staked out, sort of.
I haven't seen it lately. Have you seen it?
I just saw some little red flags sticking up out there like they'd surveyed it. And I wasn't for sure how close, far it went down there, towards that pond, but,
It gets right next to it.
okay.
Sure does.
Thank you, Mr. Wells.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, I think I had one more thing.
Transportation?
Transportation. Been working with Gold Star still. We hadn't progressed too much from the last meeting, but continue to talk about what it would look like to be competitive with our driver wages. And then how do we, the 40 buses that we have, or half our fleet that's over 10 years old, what's the possibility of integrating new buses in that? You know, what does that look like? And so we'll come back with some reports when we get further down the road on that.
When does that expire? Is that next, I mean, we
We're
got a
completing our
year?
third year, so we will be negotiating for the fourth year renewal, and then we have a fifth year if we want to do that
Oh,
also.
it's our option, and there's also the fifth year?
Yes, even currently right now, I mean, at this point, we're so far down the road on this one, it's kind of hard to switch gears at this point. There's really not enough time to really do that.
Okay.
You know, as far as getting a new fleet in or doing something like that. So just negotiate in good faith, and that's what we're doing.
Thank you. All right, Stacy, you got up once, I know, and so, whoops, transportation. Instructional
want me to talk
materials for
about
English language arts and reading.
All right, good evening, Board, and Dr. Chadwell, thank you for having me here this evening. I am here to make a recommendation for the Proclamation 2019 English Language Arts and Reading Instructional Materials Purchase. If you recall, I feel like we've been working on this pretty much all year long. We started, the opening of the bid process began in December of 2018. Then we came to you in January of 2019, and we made recommendations based on criteria for vendors who basically met a pass-fail. And so from that, and we did that because of the magnitude of this adoption. It's very large. So we then came together and took those vendors, and from those approved vendors, then that is where we really began our work with more thorough in-depth evaluation, bringing together a district team, and moving on into now what I'm recommending for step 2 of the process. The adoption is a little bit different than you may think of back in more traditional times, where we worked more closely with the state and we pretty much purchased a basal. And now, to meet the requirements and needs of the new TEKS, which will go into effect in this next school year, 2019-20, one base will not address the full needs of meeting our students' needs. The new TEKS they address 7 strands. They are much more geared toward an integrated approach to English language arts. A lot of emphasis on the standards now related to oral presentations, comprehension, and just a more integrated approach. And these necessary skills are taught more in an integrated manner rather than isolation. And I think that our team took that very seriously. We began the process by leading the district review team through a training over the TEKS. Our coordinators led that, and working with Region 11 also, just really went in depth. So there was a deep understanding that this looks different than what we've seen before. Then in addition, we've also led TEKS training with our principals, and we'll now move into this week and have the same type of training with our assistant principals. So once the approval process took place in January, we then moved into an open window. We invited those vendors to submit more tangible samples, more widespread samples. If you've been in Hafley recently, for about the past month or two, the halls are decorated fully with resources and samples. And our teachers did a great job at participating. Our teachers K-8 were invited to participate and review and have conversations and submit their thoughts on the process digitally. So then our district review team came together, and that was a large team, but I'm proud to say that every campus K-8 was represented on this team. We had teachers representing all grade levels, dyslexia, special education, bilingual. We had a librarian, we had intervention specialists, literacy coaches, and then once again, every K-8 campus was represented. So I feel like we really had a wide representation to have input in this process. So out of that then, all the input submitted by the teacher and their review period, and then our district review team came all together to evaluating resources based on the final rubric that was based on the criteria for the RFP. So out of that, an evaluation team at the district level came together, and then we got together and looked at all of the samples, resources, and proposals, and then we really started looking at criteria in terms of pricing and the other pieces that best needs of our district. When we had the review team participate, we didn't talk pricing, we didn't talk any of those things. We talked about, you think about what would be the ideal resource or bundle that a classroom teacher could truly meet the needs of students by teaching the new standards. And I think they did that. They did a very thorough job. So just in asking what we are recommending, we have multiple vendors who we would like to award this bid to. At the K-5 level, we have a primary resource, and that's put out by Heinemann. Heinemann submitted 2 different major resources, the Fontes and Pinnell, and then also the units of study. And we have representation in both. At our elementary level at K-5, our primary resource that we would like to have approved this evening is the Fontes and Pinnell classroom. It includes guided reading, interactive read-alouds, mini reading lessons, and phonics. Our bilingual resources align directly with this, and then we had additional resources that we wanted to recommend for our bilingual students so they can have access to authentic text, so instead of just translated versions. So then we went a little deeper, and they looked into Houghton Mifflin and felt like they provided a nice quantity of authentic text to help support our bilingual learners. The resources that we're also recommending follow our instructional model, our reading and writing workshop model, and we felt that it was just important to complement the pieces that we have started to implement over the past 2 years. In terms of teachers, what do they get? Every teacher receives the core pieces of the Fontes and Pinnell classroom, such as interactive read-alouds, lesson supports, and skill-based mini-lessons. We are also adding to pieces of a guided and shared reading collection that we started with our title campuses, and so now we're able to have additional funds so we can ensure that all of our classrooms across the district have access to those same materials. So our libraries that we are recommending, we feel like they provide a nice supplement and to the primary resource of the Fontes and Pinnell classroom, which has many, many components. Particularly, we've also included resources that address our Tier 2 students, and those are students who are in need of additional intervention, but primarily those interventions are provided by the classroom teacher. At 2.5, we also look for ways to expand and offer multiple texts, multiple genres, lots of student choice, and that's as a classroom resource for those reading materials, not just shared, and everyone kind of has to fend for them, fend for themselves, and I want this day and that kind of thing. The quantities in these collections are very large. So overall, these resources at the elementary level complement our new TEKS. We feel like it complements the district philosophy of reading and writing, and we feel like it's very well aligned to new systems put in place, such as our benchmark assessment system, which measures our reading levels for our students. Our spelling at K1, if you're interested, it is addressed through the phonics program, the Fontes and Pinnell, that we started last year and adding to this year, and now adding the second grade component, which is now available for our students. And then in grades 3 and 5, we'll address that through existing resources, and that will be locally developed with our curriculum writing teams, still aligned to the new standards. So then moving on to middle school, grades 6 through 8. The same kind of thing. We offer want to recommend a primary resource that fully aligns with our current writing program, and that's our units of study. Also, the vendor for that product is Heinemann. We also would like to add comprehension toolkits and additional professional text to also help teachers in leading their instruction. And then the big piece of the middle school purchase as well includes multiple vendors, so we can purchase classroom libraries. High interest, diverse text. Every teacher will receive an organized classroom library that consists of approximately 1,200 books. Lots of varied levels for students who may not be reading at level, in addition to books who extend our readers who are above reading level. So paired with our new our current writing curriculum, we feel that these are very well aligned to what the new TEKS are asking. The new TEKS basically are asking for students to have access to text, multiple text, student choice, lots of independent reading. And we feel that the items that are in the report best represent the message that our teachers were asking for, our committee was asking for, and our review team. It all aligned very well. So I would like to make a recommendation that the named vendors in the report are considered for approval this evening, so we can move on with our next steps and implementation. I would like to take a minute just to thank, and I believe you have a list of those staff members across the district who participated in the review team process. Many educators who gave up their time to come over and preview materials. But then I would also especially like to recommend, honor and highlight the work of 3 of the coordinators who were just instrumental in this process, and they're here this evening. So if you could, Angela Kennedy, Julie Vu, and Heath Dollar, dedicated just extreme amount of time. They're amazing. But when we get to this point, I feel very confident that the recommendations we are making tonight are truly representative of what our students need to adhere to the new TEKS. So.
All right, that'll be an action item coming up tonight, so especially if you have a question or comment on that, feel
Just
free.
it's a long arduous task, and you guys did a great job, so thank you.
It is. Thank you.
I
Very
thought your
informative.
report was very well, I mean, it was easy to follow, and you could tell you were excited about what you're doing.
It is.
So
It's
it was neat to read.
It's a big investment, but it has to last 10 years. The thing about it is that we can also, we're allowed, as some of these vendors add to their collections, it gives us flexibility to be able to already have them approved as vendors for the process and add to our collections. So we are very excited.
Yes, board members, as y'all know, we try to hold off having an action item in the same meeting as a report. In this case, we're giving this really to you as an option. If there is a decision made tonight, it gives us another month in terms of planning for ordering for this next school year. But it is not a must. I mean, if for some reason there is more information that you'd like, certainly we can bring this back in April as an action item if there are questions about the report or the recommendations.
All right. So noted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Summerhill. With the board's permission, I'm going to skip over Dr. Parker just because. 7 minutes. I'm sure you could do it, Dr. Parker, but we're going to go ahead and go with the TASB update 112, Ms. Andrea White. It is your lucky day. You get to, yeah, there you go.
About 3. President Newcomb, members of the board, Dr. Chadwell, I'm bringing for your consideration the TASB update 112, which includes 41 legal updates as well as 14 local. And I'm going to just highlight a couple of things. One thing in the legal policy update is the Educators Code of Ethics has had a couple of things updated, and we're going to address that with our staff and our compliance bundle for at the beginning of the year so that our educators know what the new wording is. And then in local policy, FM local is school-sponsored publications. And the revisions in this policy clarify that district and campus publications are under the district's control, and school-sponsored publications approved by the principal or produced by students are a part of the instructional program. Also in FMA, it points to GKB local, which talks about advertising and fundraising. And in this policy, it gives specific recommendations for when the district might have the right to reject an advertising, some specifics for rejections. And then the last one that I want to highlight is FNG local is our student and parent complaint or grievance policy. GF local is our public complaint policy, and then GKA local is our conduct on school premises. And what they've put in place in all three of those is for our grievance process, that if it has to do with refusal of entry or rejection from school property, and they file a grievance, that they would be able to come to the board within 90 days. And that pretty much goes along with how our grievance policy is, but they've written that in, as their recommendations for the update for those policies. Any questions?
You all received that electronically. Becky would be happy to print one out for anybody that wanted one, but we've got them all electronically, right?
Yes, yes.
The update, yeah. So, and it'll come back next
Yes,
month
right.
as approved. All right,
Okay,
thank you, Ms. White.
thank you.
I'm sure, Linda, yours would have been just as,
Oh, no, now I have time to really talk about it. I'm excited.
it is currently 6 p.m. On March 25th, 2019, this board will now recess for dinner and then reconvene in a closed meeting pursuant to the following sections of the Texas Open Meeting Act. 551.071, consultation with attorney. 551.072, discussing real property. 551.074, deliberating the appointment, employment, or reassignment duties. And that includes contract renewals for district employees. 551.075, purpose of deliberating regarding the deployment or specific occasions for implementation of security, and 551.082, considering discipline of a public school child or complaint or charge against personnel. This is a public meeting of the Board of Education of the Eagle Mountain Saginaw Independent School District. This board is reconvening the public meeting on March 25th, 2019 at 7 p.m. and will now consider the subject set forth in the posted agenda. Welcome to the action portion of our meeting. We're glad to have everyone here. And to lead off our meeting, we have Lake Point Elementary. Dr. Arnold.
Good evening to the board, Dr. Chadwell, and to all the wonderful guests. I am so pleased to bring some of the finest young men I have ever had the pleasure of being a principal to. They're a joy every day, but we would like to take a moment to thank their parents and just ask their parents and families to stand up because they send them every day and it's a joy. Come on, guys, come on. And now my joy to introduce to you Mr. Brent Caldwell. He is one of our 5th grade teachers, and 3 years ago he started the Young Man's Club. He's going to tell you a little bit about that, and then each of our young men have something that they would like to share with you before we do the pledge and the prayer.
Hello, I am Brent Caldwell. I'm a 5th grade teacher at Lake Point Elementary. I started the Young Man's Club about 3 years ago. And it came from a need I saw in the elementary school, the need for a positive male influence and a need to help guide young men into being gentlemen. The purpose, the club really focuses on a variety of different aspects of being a gentleman, and from there I'm just going to kind of let the gentleman here with me tonight kind of explain that. We actually have another 12 members that weren't able to make it tonight, so this is just about half. So we're going to start with Nikki.
Hello, I'm Michael Sartori, and the Young Men's Club taught me respect, kindness, and that the little things in life matter. Hi, I'm Landon Miller, and the thing I like the most about Young Men's Club is being able to collaborate with young men my age.
Hello, I'm Jalen Watkins. I joined the Young Men's Club because some people don't have their dad to teach them how to be a gentleman, but this club teaches us how to be a good gentleman.
Hi, my name is Parker Ranham, and the Young Men's Club has taught us boys how to be kind and courteous, and also how to handle wins and losses with grace and respect.
Hi, I'm Bryce Guyton. We are a group of kids who learn how to be a leader and show respect to people. We use our manners to say yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, and no ma'am.
I am Josiah Bo. I like the Young Men's Club because it teaches us how to be kind, use our manners, practice good sportsmanship. He teaches us how to dress nice, like wear ties.
Hi, my name is Landon Steves, and the Young Men's Club is for all young men of America. I hope everyone can relate. I hope you can think that everyone should be kind to each other.
I feel that this club has improved as a young man and has made me more respectful.
Hi, my name is Tiberius. I joined the Young Men's Club to present good sportsmanship and learn that it's okay to lose. Hello, my name is John Michael Mercado. The Young Men's Club not only teaches us how to be a proper gentleman, but to be the greatest gentleman in our future.
Hello, my name is Skylar Gurley. I joined Mr. Caldwell or Young Men's Club because I wanted to learn a few manners and tips for later in life.
Man Club is that everybody needs to hold themselves others and accountable for our actions and choices.
Thank you. Y'all all look like young leaders.
Please stand for the pledge to the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please stand for the pledge to the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Please stand for a moment of prayer. Thank you, Jesus, for letting a group of young men in Mr. Caldwell to learn about being a better young man. Amen.
Thank you. We enjoyed that. Thank you, men, for sharing that with us. Our next communications director, Megan Overman.
I'm not sure I can follow that.
Now you have a hard act to follow.
My son was in that program last year, and it was amazing. So I want to thank Mr. Caldwell and Lake Point and all of these young men for just being so awesome that you are. So tonight we are excited. Normally the communications department is on the other side of these recognitions, but tonight I'd like to do a little bragging on our communications team. Recently, we attended TSPRA, the Texas School Public Relations Association. That's our state organization, and we attended the state conference. At the state conference, there were about 800 school PR professionals from across the state who were there represented. Countless districts, hundreds of districts that were there. And they have a big awards ceremony, like most organizations do. And I am proud to announce that our communications team earned a total of 12 state awards, ranging everywhere from bronze to silver to mostly gold stars on that. And I'm very proud of that group. If they would come forward, please. I've got Chelsea and April and Chris are here with me tonight. More than 1,400 award entries were submitted from school districts and education service organizations from across the state. This is actually the third consecutive year that we've won either a state or national awards for the communications work that we have tried to produce. And I want to give a special recognition to Chelsea. Wave, Chelsea. Chelsea won 2 Best of categories for her work. So that's the highest honor that you can get in these awards, and I just wanted to give them some recognition for the work that they have done. So if you don't mind, yay! They're very shy. They like behind the camera instead of in front of the camera, but thank you for allowing us the opportunity to recognize this talented team. I'm blessed to work with them. So, another thing you'll see is this is our second edition of this. This is going in the awards next year. We expect to come home with something big on that one. So enjoy that piece. Okay. Our second recognition tonight is our National Merit Scholar finalist, Stephen Lee from Saginaw High School. Very Stephen. We are very proud to recognize senior Stephen Lee for being named a 2019 National Merit Scholar finalist. He participates on the Saginaw High School Math, Science, and Computer Science UIL teams. He's ranked number 3 in his graduating class and has made the Dean's List at Tarrant County College, where he currently has 30 college credit hours already. After graduation, Stephen will attend Rice University on a full scholarship. on majoring in chemical and biomolecular engineering and will conduct undergraduate research in the production of proteins and gene editing. So I asked him before the meeting what that really means, and he explained it to me, but I'm not gonna try. All I know is that he's gonna come up with life-saving treatments for diseases and situations and all sorts of organisms that need help right now. So we are thankful to have Stephen coming from Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD. Congratulations.
I'm very proud to be with y'all also.
Wonderful. And can we recognize Stephen's parents? His family is here.
I'm very proud of my parents.
Do you want to tell them?
I just want to say, I want to thank my parents for being with me all 17 or almost 18 years of my life, because without them, I'd probably be homeless.
Well, I know they're very proud of you, and we are too. Congratulations.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie.
That concludes our recognitions.
Special introductions now.
Yes,
Dr.
we'll
Parker?
continue on this
Sure.
theme of recognizing gentlemen and scholars. So it is my privilege tonight to introduce our new principal of Ed Wilkie Middle School, Mr. Brian Booker. You come on down. Mr. Brian Booker started on Monday with us at being a gentleman. Ed Wilkie Middle School, he comes to us from Rockdale ISD by way, well, first Georgetown and then principal in Pflugerville, assistant principal there in Rockdale. 15 years of education. I'm very excited. This is what I think is really interesting. He has 50 hours in trauma-informed equine therapy. Isn't that awesome? So do you have horses?
I don't have them, but if you know someone who wants to let me take them.
We'll do that. But very excited. He has joined us here in EMS ISD, relocated with his family, as well as his 2 children, and I have their names written down, his wife Kimberly and Jackson and Whitley, who are 2 and 5, correct?
Yes.
Have that right?
Yeah.
And he is a longtime Bearcat member of, graduate from Sam Houston State University, and also possesses not only his master's, but his superintendency. We're proud to have him part of our family and are excited about the future. I need to commend Danny Knowles as well for being here and being his mentor in this transition process. So, thank you.
Dr.
Glad to have you.
Welcome.
You're welcome to come.
As a parent of 2 future Greenfield Gators, I thank you, board members, for your dedication to public education and for your governance to get our wonderful school district to where it is today. And as a new leader of Eagle Mountain Saginaw ISD, I thank you for the trust that you've given me and the opportunity that I have to help grow our next generation of future leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. All right, we did have one person that wanted to speak and address the board, so I will read our script for our oral speakers. Thank you for coming tonight to share your opinion. Before we start, a few rules of order regarding the public comment portion of the meeting. According to board policy, each speaker has 5 minutes to speak. The total public comment portion cannot be more than 30 minutes total for all speakers. We will have our board secretary, Donna Webb, keeping time tonight. She will hold up time cards showing the time you have remaining. If the item is not on the board agenda, the board may not ask or answer questions or make any comment regarding what is said. Please note that to comply with FERPA laws on student privacy, you may not mention the student by name. Additionally, according to board policy, you may not make derogatory comments about any staff member, either by name or title. Should you need to file a complaint, you may do this through our formal grievance process outlined in board policy. Tammy?
Yes.
I know you didn't need any of that, but welcome. Glad to have you.
I might. I was
Floor is
trying to
yours.
break his record, Sheila's record today. But I'll stay within my
All right.
box. President Newcomb, Board of Trustees, and Dr. Chadwell, good evening. My name is Tammy Sanford. I am the Regional Manager for United Educators Association. Each year, we compile a comparison of teacher salaries across the Western Metroplex, and the Eastern Metroplex. We include EMS on the western side. However, Dr. Dawkins wants us to include you guys on the eastern side, so we're just gonna, next year, we're gonna just do one with everybody so you can see everyone. This is where you are and where you stand, and the progression that you've made from last year to this year. We send this to approximately 90,000 educators and future educators in this area. And it is our experience, and I tell you each year, that there are 3 things that attract and retain the best and the brightest. The first is always compensation and pay. You guys did a wonderful job last year coming up, and I know some other people came up a little bit more too, but we're gonna talk about that because this year we decided to do something different. New teachers look at it to determine where they'd like to start their careers, and some of your more seasoned and experienced teachers, they look at it to see where they would like to end their careers for their last 5. The second is benefits. We don't have a lot to do with that, but the teachers' voices and the educators' voices were heard at the polls this year. So I think some things are about to change in regards to compensation and benefits from Austin, we hope, and we're doing everything possibly that we can to assist in that. The last thing is the working conditions, which establish and maintains the culture and the climate of an organization. That is the real reason that teachers stay. Sometimes it's not the compensation, sometimes it's not the benefit, it's just the feeling of family. And that's the one thing I can say about EMS. Every time I walk in this building, it's like family. If I see you at Polito's, it's still just family. Tony Hsieh says of Zappos once said, businesses often forget about the culture and ultimately they suffer for it because you can't deliver good service from unhappy employees. He goes on to say, our belief is if you can get the culture right, most of the other stuff, like great customer service or building a great long-term brand or empowering passionate employees and customers, will happen on its own. We know that salaries attract, but working conditions and culture is something that is in your control, and you do an excellent job of that. Which brings us to the second part of our presentation. This is the teacher turnover rate. And the one thing that I can say is that Eagle Mountain is below the state average in regards to the teacher turnover rate. In this area alone, there are 3 of your neighboring districts that are in the top 6. Of those, their turnover rate is over 19%. And that's a horrible thing when you look at it. When you look at some of your other districts that have 10%, 12%, 16%, which is good. They're holding it, and that includes retirement. And this last year, you had a lot of retirements. It goes on to speak volumes, as I said, when their turnover rate is 19%. We at UEA want to thank you for being a district where all employees are appreciated, valued, and respected. We thank you for your time and consideration, and we always ask that you do whatever you can do to compensate your employees. All right, thank you very much, and y'all have a great day.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move now to the action items. The first is to act on a joint election with Tarrant County. Mr. Shealy.
We give the board president and the superintendent the authority to enter into the May 2019 joint election agreement and contract for election services.
Second.
Motion by Paige and a second by Liz. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? And there are none. Motion carries 6-0. Next is to set a special meeting to canvass the 19 school trustee election.
We have to canvass the election no sooner than the 3rd day and no later than the 11th day. That is somewhere between the 7th and the 15th. We do and are waiting for information from Tarrant County. It would be nice to have it before we canvass. We have recommended the 15th. We are open on that. We only need 2 members to canvass the election.
So moved.
Motion by Donna and second by Liz to approve the special meeting to canvass the school trustee election for May 15th, 2019. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? And there are none. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Shealy. Act on bids and proposals. The First is the extension of proposal for gasoline and diesel fuel.
I move we extend the agreement with Douglas Distributing for gasoline and diesel fuel for the first option year to expire July 31st, 2020. Estimated annual expense of $456,748. Actual total will depend on product use.
Second.
Motion by Donna, second by Marilyn. Questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? There are none. Figured since you made the motion, you were okay with that, Donna. Next is the extension of proposal for abatement of asbestos containing materials in definite quantities. Mr. Shealy.
We are required to have a contract for the removal of asbestos. We haven't done this for a while. The estimate of $100,000 is high, but we do have asbestos in several of our buildings. Fortunately, it's contained or encapsulated, and I don't believe we have anything that intends to disturb that. But nevertheless, we are asking to extend the agreement with Adval Incorporated for abatement of asbestos-containing materials in indefinite quantities for the first option year to expire May 31st, 2020. Estimated annual expense of $100,000. The actual total will depend on district needs.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Paige, second by Donna. Questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? And there are none. Motion carries 6-0. Next is network electronics and access points for E-rate.
We accepted competitive seal proposals for the network electronics and access points for fiscal year 2019 E-rate funding. The proposals were received and opened on January 31st. There were 4 responsive bidders. After evaluation, the administration recommends awarding this proposal to Global Assets. Option A, Meraki MR45. The recommendation is to award network electronics and access points for fiscal year 2019 E-rate funding year to Global Assets for a total of $1,674,704.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Donna. Is that Liz or Marilyn? Liz, second by Liz. Questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? And there are none. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Shealy. Next is to act on the purchase and installation of artificial turf at Boswell High School football, baseball, softball, and auxiliary fields. Mr. Dwayne Jones, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Newcomb, trustees, and Dr. Chadwell. As stated, this is for the purchase and installation of several turf fields at Boswell High School. Texas Ed Code 44031 states that we can use a state-approved purchasing cooperative for the procurement of goods and services. Additionally, board policy CH Legal also allows that if a district participates in a cooperative purchasing program, that it satisfies any law requiring it to seek competitive bids. Basically, that's just basically saying that an RFP has already been performed, and so therefore we can forego that step in the process and just go straight to requesting quotes. So that is exactly what the operations department did. We requested quotes, excuse me, a proposal from Hellas Construction using the one GPA procurement cooperative of which we are a member. Hellas did provide a proposal. Administration, we did identify one GPA as providing the best value for the district. Hellas, for the particular type of infill that we were desiring. Hellas has done approximately 100 of these fields nationwide, about 30 of which are in the state of Texas, all using the same type of infill that we're looking for. So the recommendation that we're making is to award to Hellas Construction in the amount of $6,030,085.
Second.
Motion by Marilyn, second by Paige. Any discussion?
Yeah. A little bit of discussion. I guess, and I talked to Cleet earlier today and Dr. Chadwell as well. I guess my only concern on this is, you know, I know there are other, and talking to Cleet, there are other contractors that do this, and not to get a competitive bid is something that, you know, I think for that amount of money, I mean, I can understand if it's a time factor thing, as far as a small amount that we don't spend time with a competitive bid. But I don't know, just me personally, I think, you know, something of that magnitude that we probably ought to get I mean, is there another reason we didn't get it? I mean, I know maybe Dr. Chadwell alluded that we wanted to use these services, but I just don't remember maybe at this level of purchase that we use those kind of services, the buy board type things. Anybody's thought on that?
That was a question to, not to me.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm sorry, I thought it was a question to you.
No, I think,
mean,
well, Mr.
Anybody
Jones may
can,
want to.
anybody
that
can
wants to
interject, but
answer
I don't know, I wasn't under the impression we were, that amount we were
No,
gonna
I'd
make
be-
this kind of.
Okay, no, I'd
The
be happy to
comment,
respond.
one of the comments, a question, right, why didn't we get another?
Well, yeah, I mean, why did we not go to competitive bid? I mean, just,
Okay.
was there a timing thing? Was
Sure.
it, what was it?
Well, first, and what you were just alluded to a second ago is that in our previous discussions, and when we were talking about procurement, we've discussed using co-ops more often. And using co-ops when we feel like a co-op will be a desirable process that we can use, because they do a lot of the work for us. They go out, they qualify, and you may, with your experience, particularly most recently in your previous job, feel free to add to anything I say, but they do a lot of our work for us by going out and qualifying the vendors and by getting competitive pricing. And so when we can use those services, we can move much more efficiently and not using our staff to do those processes, but rather using them. In the case of Hellas, the specific product that's listed there that includes the geofill that's mentioned, that was a requirement of what we were going to do in order to decrease the field temperature. They were the only company that was listed that actually has built a field in Texas that I know of. There may have been others, but I don't think there was any others that had built in Texas.
Correct.
And so we felt like with our previous experience with Hellas, with the process that we could go through, with utilizing the co-op, and with having other Hellas fields and feeling that we got good service from them. And then looking at the prices, we looked at the market and we felt like the price was within what other people are paying for those fields. And so it wasn't out of range. And it was also within our bond buy, line for those products. So with all that being said, you know, we move forward with it. You know, as I've shared when we talked, is that there's nothing wrong with going to a competitive process. I think I would need some direction of what are those times that we use a separate traditional bid process and we go to competitive bid. So I have a better line to know which that is, because I felt like we were within the spirit of.
Have we ever done anything this big? I don't remember. Maybe
We
we
did furniture. How much did we spend on furniture on Marine Creek?
Right at $1 million.
It's right at $1 million.
Marine Creek. We bought, we went through buy board for furniture.
Right.
This is probably the largest, I would say.
I didn't remember anything nearly this big. but-
Yeah, well, no, sir, I don't think there was one
Right.
big, just the furniture. Do you want to add
But
anything?
are you buying a product because of that temperature cooling, that they are the only ones that have the technology, so would nobody else even qualify
They're
on the
not
bid
the
if
only
you bid
ones
it?
that have geofill is other companies have used the product, but they haven't used the product in Texas on installations in Texas yet. There are some plans to do that in the future, but nothing. They probably have more extensive experience of using that than others. Not to say that others can't, because there's other good companies, but again, we felt like this was a good, if we brought to you several different line items from a co-op, then you might as well not use a co-op, you might as well just go out and traditionally bid it. Because that's the whole point, is to go out and, because they've already pre-qualified all the vendors, they've already gotten, they've done everything that we normally would do through our purchasing department.
Let me ask you this question, on this one, how do they rank, what's the name of these guys, whatever they are, this contractor, as far as, value on what they submit? I mean, how do they qualify them? Do they qualify them once a year, twice, every 2 years? How do they come up with that that's a good value that we're getting for this $6 million?
Each cooperative does their RFPs a little bit differently. Something like this potentially, or one GPA is probably on a 1 year. Sometimes they'll do multi-years, kind of like what we've done here where we do a renewal, but each year they have to go through a renewal process to propose any kind of increases if they want. And then they are reapproved. Basically, they may have a 5-year contract, but it's annually renewable. But the way cooperatives are typically set up, they do everything on a 1 year, just to make sure that everything's fresh, everything's up to date, so that, because their sole purpose is basically to provide districts and municipalities the ability to forego that cost and that time factor, so they can vet these vendors for use. So they want to keep it as up to date and current as possible.
So do you know when the last time these guys were bid out as far as against other competitors?
I don't know the exact date for one GPA, but it would be within the last year. I don't know the exact date of when the
So when they do that, do they say,
RFP.
well, you know, here's a arbitrary field, give me a bid on this field, and they do other contractors as well, or how they do it?
Typically, again, each cooperative is different, but typically it's going to be where they'll just submit an RFP, the cooperative will, and then they respond to it. The prospective vendors will respond just like they were responding to anything else, any other, even if it was coming directly from an end user. And then it goes through the same process at the cooperative, where there's a committee that goes through and they review it, they tabulate it, and then they award. Sometimes they'll award to one, sometimes they'll award to several, depending on what the service or commodity is. But in this case, one GPA has a couple of different ones that provide this type of product. But as Dr. Chadwell already stated, as far as in the state of Texas, Hellas is the only one that has a proven track record of being able to install it successfully.
What's the warranty on this field?
8 years.
8 years warranty?
Yes,
What
sir.
about replenishing it in pecan shell or something? Isn't that what they use?
Yeah, it's crushed coconut husk.
Coconut, okay,
Yes.
okay.
So
I mean, how often do you have to do that? What's a maintenance cost, you know, on that?
maintenance costs really, I mean, you do have to keep it moist. Even though it's an artificial turf field, you keep it moist just to, so that the field itself coconut husk, if it's dry, would have a tendency to maybe blow or have impact from wind. So there will be some water, but as far as on the size of a field, compared to like a regular grass field, the cost for water is significantly lower.
Well, it's
then
15 minutes every 3 weeks if it's not rained. Like this time of the year, you wouldn't have to use water, but going back to your question about the coconut husk, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Welch, but when we visited those campuses that had it, they've never replenished it, and it's been 3 years, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's not something that you have to do every year. If you keep it moist, it doesn't chafe, it goes down into the field. The traditional rubber pellets we have that collect in your shoes and collect in our dryers at home, that process doesn't occur because it's more like an organic material. It tends to mat differently than, the rubber pellets never mat, they never stick together. This actually sticks together, it's designed to do that. So if it stays moist, it doesn't need replenishment like on an annual basis or anything like that.
But we did a cost analysis deciding that we wanted to go with it. I don't remember,
We did,
recall seeing
the
that. I remember
benefit of
seeing the
the
presentation on it. I don't remember how
Yes.
we got to deciding that we for sure wanted to do this.
The drivers for us, obviously, just an artificial field period, is to do with lawn maintenance and water.
Right.
This does require water, but it's a very minuscule amount of water, really. It's just to keep that area moist. The big driver for us, beyond just having a good quality artificial field, was actually to have a product that would decrease the temperature at the field level. That would then increase the playability of those fields in the summer when we use it, and hopefully being able to expand the hours of usage. That was really the push for us, is this particular product, having the GeoFill product would allow us to have temperatures that are more like grass than like the rubber. They claim, and we've seen it by shooting using a laser temperature gauge, about a 40-degree difference between the artificial turf and this turf in a 100-degree temperature.
And that makes a lot of sense. The piece I didn't know is if we looked at the cost differential and made sure that that was justified.
The cost differential of the G-Fill material we felt was not particularly significant. I mean, it's more than a traditional fill with the rubber. However, the usage is much more increased, so there's not a number.
Like order of magnitude, it's like 10% higher, or it's like
Oh,
100%
no.
higher? It's like, I mean,
No.
not even that, negligible?
In fact, it may
Okay.
be
It's
in-
negligible.
Clay, did you have to put an irrigation system in? How do you water this?
Yeah, there's several different ways you can do that. You can manually do it by rolling it out, you know, when you need to do that. Or you have a underground sprinkler system that'll do it automated. Two different ways to do that. One at Marine Creek is the automated system.
It's shooting it from cannons from the side, so it's not in the field. It shoots from actually right by the track. It shoots out, and I believe there's 6.
Like the old cannons you used to have up there, just from the edge, you just, you know. And the problem with those systems, like the reason we got away from those on grass fields, is just the amount of, when you get wind. Because it's a big cannon, so, you know, the more wind you have.
And that's in here, so that cost of, is in here.
Yes.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion by Marilyn and the second by Paige, please raise your hand. Any opposed? There is one. Motion carries 5-1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is to approve the instructional materials for English language, arts, and reading. Summerhill presented a report on that at the 5 o'clock session. I'm sure she would be happy to answer any questions that anybody has.
I move we award the proposal of instructional materials for English, language, arts, and reading, grades K through 8 to Heinemann, Pioneer Valley, Book Source, Houghton.
Houghton.
Okay, help me. Houghton, Mifflin, Harcourt, and Isaac. Second.
We should have had her read that, Donna.
Yeah, I know.
So moved. Motion by Donna, second by Liz. Questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? And there are none. Motion carries 6-0. That is the conclusion of our action items. And we did happen to have one report left over from the 5 o'clock session.
Linda, how long?
Dr. Parker, you
Long
have the
as it
floor
takes.
for the Aspire 2022 Strategic Plan Update. You're not limited by us having to break for
Thank you, I
for,
appreciate that.
dinner
I'm
or
so
anything,
excited to
so,
be here.
yes, happy to have you.
It is always nice to stand before you and have the opportunity to talk about our strategic plan. This begins on page 56 of Board Book if you need to want to scroll along with me. In September, I presented an update of the strategic plan with numerical updates in regards to our rubrics. At this point, we're all at 3.0 and above, and we're nearing that 4-point mark. What I wanted to do tonight was share some specifics and highlight that specific work, focus work that we're doing. Of course, we always start with our mission and have added our 3 core goals of Aspire 2022, which are the target of our work. Within that, these are built upon our core beliefs. And you know, I know we go over these and we go over these, it's like, okay, we know them, but you can ask people in our district about our mission, you can ask them about our core beliefs, and they, I guarantee, are familiar with it. If they can't cite it specifically, they can definitely paraphrase it. Our Aspire plan, of course, has does not just have the 3 specific goals, but it also has the profile of the EMS ISD graduate. We've added that piece to it because we want our students leaving with these skills here of thinking critically, communicating effectively, collaborating with peers, demonstrating career readiness, and contributing meaningfully to the community. Our strategies on this are designing and implementing a system where our personalized educations create, I'm not going to read each one of these, I'm sorry. Our 6 strategies are the very foundation of the work that we do. This is the same chart that you saw in September, and you can see we're above that 3-point mark. Our goal is to hit the 4 in proficient. And when we look at our personalized education plans in strategy 1, this is the information that we've got going. We're working on this. We've had a little glitch with Zello this year. Our middle school's been fine on it, but they're reworking at the elementary. One of the key things here are our data folders for elementary. We're goal setting K through 12. But our data folders in elementary have really taken off. And even at the secondary level, kids can talk to you about their goals in reading, their goals in math. And sometimes it's interesting, it depends on how you ask it or how the teachers have presented it, whether they understand they're actually a goal. You know, so with one particular group, we had to go, you know, the purple papers that you're filling out, and they're like, okay, I have it. But when we get to elementary, it's really targeted, and we've been successful. Our goal this year, when we think about next steps, was ensuring that our students led conferences. And so at open house, our students were leading conferences with their parents and their data folders. When you walk into a classroom over on, I guess it would be your right side, many of our classrooms have the PDSA model of the classroom goal, what they're working on, how they're going to do it, how they're going to track it, and then based on that, what actions they will take. This with the star, the Shazam sign, is a student's goal setting, tracking her reading goals with ISIP. And so you can see where the child is tracking per month where she is, she's growing in her goal, moving towards that. The next slide is, and I don't know why that black covered up. I don't know why when you create a PowerPoint, it works great, and then when you pull it up here, it looks differently. But this would be the student folder, My Goals, the student folder. Within this, this is at one particular school. All schools in the elementary are utilizing data folders. They all may not look exactly the same. This is the level the child's on and the words that this child would need for that level. Then you see the writing goals, and then again, you see his goal, end of year goal, EOY of 20, and then here's the progress towards meeting that goal. So when you go into an elementary classroom, if you say, let me look at your data folder, all of a sudden you'll have 25 kids with data folders pulled out, ready to share their story. It's really awesome. And they will even tell you to go away if you're interrupting their reading time. It's great. And we're doing that in math. We're doing that in reading, those two specifically. And then you'll see writing goals as well. But when we get up into high school, one of the things that we wanted to focus on this year is the use of our college and career centers and really making those more accessible to our students. So Mariela, my mind went totally blank. Mariela, our Director of Counseling, brought this data to me showing from August to February the amount of students who are visiting the career centers. And I think these are really great numbers, and they will serve as our baseline data. If you notice underneath that in parentheses, we've got lots of partnerships because that connects to our strategy number 6, I believe, or 5, in mentor visits, UNT mentor visits, personal college visits, college applications, etc. So really doing a lot more. And their websites also have been updated with the personalized.
It's visits or it's actually unique students? I'm assuming it's visits. So one person could have gone there for a UTA mentorship and a college application and
yeah.
counted.
Yes. Technology, strategy 2. We're got lots of momentum going here in strategy 2 with our technology. And in this, hang on, I've ran ahead of myself. We're proud of the momentum. While we're not a one-to-one district, I can tell you that other districts are asking us about our plan, how our plan works, and how we have really intentionally worked with our technology and our instructional curriculum and instruction to embed it. So it's not a technology-driven curriculum, but it's a technology-enhanced curriculum. So we've been very pleased with our Promethean displays, the additional devices that are going in, and so we want to evaluate these. In the next slide, you're going to see some of that use. The blue line is Office 365. The lime line is OneDrive. These graphs and charts are showing the use on any given month and really into the days of that month. If you see this, we're pretty steady in our use. The little box shows you we've had 2,042 on any given day use of Office 365, and then down there in OneDrive, 1,794 use in any one given day. When you move to the next piece, this chart, I want to start on the right with the little compasses. And so if you look at 2018, and again, the OneDrive starting at the top, in 2018 we had about 265 active users, and then here we have 5,229 comparing. Going on down, if you look at the OneDrive, total active files in 2018 we had 7,911, and currently we have 49,827. So very impressive. The next piece beside it with all the colorful boxes are the, it's really impressive. 2018, if you look at this is the top 10 most active campuses with technology. The focus here, 2018, we mainly had 3 high schools. 3 high schools were utilizing most of the technology pieces. 2019, the growth district-wide has greatly expanded down to our elementary campuses. So we're seeing a lot, especially in middle school, Wayside, Creekview, Willow Creek, High Country. So they've increased and they've bumped into that top 10. So just kind of neat things that Kirk and his team are able to pull for us. We talked about Canvas, and just recently we were in a discussion about are our students using Canvas, and this is wonderful. This slide shows you that the peaks of use of Canvas, you always see a little dip in August, because right before August, the summer dip because we're not in school. But look at this over the last 3 years. Our active courses, this is very important. The number of courses, they have at least 1 teacher enrollment with activity time. They have at least 3 student enrollments with activity time, and have a course and enrollment term start date or a course enrollment term end date. So when we look at these, they're logged into by at least 4 different users during the current month. And if you go over here, you can see where we're having over, up in the thousands of course activity. And then when we look at our active users, that continues to grow. Both of these are continuing to grow. And let me make sure the student, we have, if you look at the bottom left in green, we have 7,995 students, and in the blue, teachers, over 305 teachers, and then observers, people who can just look at the courses and see what's happening in Blackboard. So we feel like our learning platform system is really giving us a bang for our buck. We're pleased with it. Here's just some basic data. When you look at it in as far as numbers, Kirk took a month and looked at a month, and that's where we have the 8,000 student participants in the last 30 days, 300 teacher participants. And when we look at 1,080 in a one-day period, that's actual 1 student, 1 participant. So not like when we were talking about the career visits, multiple. And for a student to be counted as a participant, they have to go in and stay over 3 minutes. I think the number, 184,000 pages visited, and then just, again, verifies our use with that. And Microsoft Office is the same way. A lot of times we think, well, are the students really using Microsoft Office? Are they using their email? Are they using the pieces we have in that? And you can see here how much use they have. 883,000 emails sent to students, but only, I thought it was a little over 100,000 were actually read, so I thought they'd get some scam. Oh, that was interesting. Collaborative work. I don't think anything better represents collaborative work than what we did with the adoption process, the proclamation 2019. All of the different departments having to come together and work on that. I know that Stacy, I just give kudos to her and Lucia. working together to ensure that they had an appropriate system, they followed the protocols, and then had stakeholder input. I think that is very important. When we looked at collaborative work according to our rubrics in this, the next step to move to proficient, we're at a 3.9. If we want to get to proficient, which I think will be there by this next September, we had to ensure that we were utilizing site visits and that we were actually going to other campuses. So here's where we have, this is a picture of a CLC, our curriculum learning community. They're looking at benchmark data. They are teachers of like subject areas collaborating together. I think that's critical, and we have our coordinator in there as well, working with Ilmandria Bolding. Second piece is the statement at the bottom. I polled the principals K through 12 and asked them about if they had sent a teacher to another campus to watch another teacher of like assignment, and we have 100% of that happening. So that's good when there's a need or just to learn from. Culture, pardon me. We rank high in culture. It was very nice to hear the words of UEA as well. When we look at our culture and our character ed programs and safety and security and that professional development aligned to motivational strategies, everything in here we are working to do to just make our culture stronger. Our safety and security led by Dr. Baker has just been incredible this year. Our use of Crisis Go apps, we're very pleased and proud of that. Some of the things particularly we've worked on is that alignment of processes. We brought that to you, talked about that in the TAPER update. We're working now on that multi-tiered system of support for PBIS, the RTI, everything aligned in, we'll be bringing and reporting to you with that in a few months. And then safety drills, as I said earlier. Partnerships added this year, all pro dads at all secondary campuses, Read to Win, all elementary campuses, and then our YMCA offered free employee memberships. We have, I think, over 700 free employee memberships, and 300 and something of those have been turned into family partnerships. They're looking for ways to expand their work with us as well. Extremely proud of these. I also want to add that Lions Quest has agreed once again and even expanded our work with STEM this summer. So they're giving us over $15,000 to help with our STEM grant for the summer. Program evaluation and assessment. This key things I brought at the beginning are above. Working, let me tell you, Karen Miller keeps us aligned, working all the time, making sure that we're doing feedback. We're working through her to make sure that we're not overlapping things as well in our programs. What we have struggled with is finding a company and working with people to do the program evaluations. We've just partnered with EAB, actually went to a conference last week to look at program evaluations to get data that we need, and am anxious for that piece, especially with the depth of data that they'll be able to give us in research for some of our programs and what works best. And then use of Forecast 5, we continue to work with them. They have our dashboards up and going, and if you'd like some examples, I'll put those in the next board update. We've also revised our performance targets again this year. We did that in January as we looked at our TAPER data and continue to work on, again, that alignment of professional development. The last strategy, recruitment, again in the 3.7. Very pleased with that. I think we have a strong team working together. Our HR team has been very creative in ways to recruit people and to make sure they're compensated correctly, all the things UEA talked about. We're working to do. Word of mouth is the great, well, let me back up. Let me go from the bottom up. We believe in best practices. We believe that we need to teach our teachers how to use the best practices. So when you do that, then you offer competitive salaries, you train and support them through a mentorship program. They're going to talk, they're going to visit, and they're going to tell others to come here. So it all aligns. And that's all of us working together as a team. I'm very proud of being EMS here, being part of the family and working together. And I think that's why when we talk about our strategic plan, it really lives for us. So that brings me to the end, and it's all about setting those goals, releasing inner capacities and involving all human potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. One comment? You sure may.
I just want to acknowledge the work of everybody that works to work the Aspire plan. That's everyone in this room, literally. And I'm just very thankful for all of you, and because strategic plans can sit on shelves or on computer hard drives and nothing happens. And there's so much evidence of showing that our actions are really always relate back to our strategic plan. It's also very interesting talking to people that come to our school district. Some of them are in this room right now that actually reviewed our strategic plan before they chose us. And they actually mentioned it, and not just in passing, but specific elements of it. When they become a part of our team, they realize we really do work this plan. It's given us a lot of focus, but 2022 is not that far away. And so we'll be thinking about the next
Already
step.
started that
Yeah,
next
we'll be
step.
talking about the next
Thinking.
step, so, thank you.
Will it be 2032 or?
I'm not sure.
You haven't decided yet?
Sure. No, sir. No, sir, not yet.
Still to be
We are not going to
determined.
name it .20.
That concludes our reports from the 5 o'clock session. Next, we move into the routine monthly reports. Anybody have a question on those? Hearing none, Dr. Chappell, review the 19 board planning calendar.
Yes, on page 193 of your packet, we have an additional budget status report, operations report, including child nutrition. We also have the 2019-2020 staffing proposal. This is the district staffing, not to be confused with the secondary and elementary staffing. Again, we're using more new titles here, so hopefully these will be easier to keep straight. You may decide not after it, but we'll try. And then we also, this is different, the continuing education report comes this next month, and so that's different than it used to be. So just knowing that that's coming in April. And I guess that's about it. Everything else there is things that you're familiar with.
All right, thank you. Next is the consent agenda for approval.
Second.
Motion by Liz, second by Paige to approve the consent agenda. Any questions? Seeing none, please raise your hand. We approve. Thank you. Motion carries 6-0. Board President announcements. I really don't have anything in particular to mention. I think Dr. Chappell's going to go over the upcoming meetings and things ahead of us, so I'll turn it over to him.
Yes, sir. We do have a number of events coming up to mark your calendar. On April the 8th, we have the Week of the Young Child. It kicks off at 9:30. If you're going to attend, let us know. We'd love to have you there. It's a really great morning, just watching our youngest kids in the district, and just a really neat program. It's fun watching them, see how long they can sit still, which I'm just going to tell you is not long, not long at all. They always ask me to speak, which I think is funny, because like 3-year-olds really want to hear the superintendent speak. I'm not sure if 30-year-olds want to hear it either, but anyway. Then we have April the 16th, we have Employee Service Awards. That's at the Hollenstein. Please let us know if you're planning on attending. We also have an evening with the experts on April the 30th. There's a difference to that. In the past, that's only been elementary in the PACE programs. This year, we'll actually have humanities students from our middle school involved as well. They'll be doing presentations as a part of the curriculum, their work. And so I know that I've got my email at home, going to be prepared. And Capstone will be there as well.
Capstone will be there as well to
Then it will be a
represent the high
family
schools.
affair. Well, I know where the entire Chadwell family will be that night then. But it's really a lot of fun. Evening of the Experts is one of the, really so enjoyable, and we're glad we're adding those components. That's going to be great. We also have art experience on May the 3rd at the Hollenstein. We also have the Education Gala on May the 18th. And finally, at the end of the year, we have the annual District Reading Festival. That's at all 3 high schools at the same time, 5 to 6:30. It's hosted by our campuses. It's elementary students will receive books, free books, gently used books, and new ones. And then also it's all led by our campuses, including our students. So that was a mouthful, but there's a lot before the end. So, and we're not even to the end yet. So that's it.
All right, thank you, Dr. Chappell. Seeing that there's no further business to come before this board, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Dick, second by Liz. We're adjourned.